Chuck Robinson. I'm a media activist here with the Texas Media Empowerment Project, and I kind of wanted to, for that, my name is Chuck Robinson. I'm a media activist here with the Texas Media Empowerment Project, and I kind of wanted to attempt to connect the many dots that outline this debacle. The public access struggle here obviously is front and center, and we're running into a lot of problems trying to get information from the city and from Time Warner on exactly what was agreed upon and exactly where these funds have been directed since Time Warner resumed payment in May. So again, this is a connection between our city government and a corporation. Just real quick, let's go ahead and kind of highlight the study that we gave you all, and this is how bigger media will hurt Texas. For the average person that may not know, what this outlines is what would go through if the FCC's proposed deregulation gets approved. In 2004, the FCC had hearings here, and San Antonio showed up, and 500 people raised hell outside of city council chambers and put it in Michael Powell's face. And Michael Powell, of course, his father was on the board of AOL, Colin Powell, and that merger went through with Time Warner, and Colin Powell benefited greatly. Well, San Antonio stood up to Michael Powell and said, no more deregulation. And of course, Michael Powell resigned in disgrace later in 2004. Since then, the FCC has been tiptoeing around San Antonio, and even when we went to Austin to testify at the FCC hearing, we found it very difficult to get San Antonio's viewpoint out. This study highlights how cities and communities in Texas will be affected by this proposed legislation. So if we're going to allow cross-media mergers, as in the Express News was allowed to buy out KENS 5, or the Express News was allowed to buy KSAT, or vice versa. We're a one newspaper town, and over a third of the newspapers in Texas are the only newspaper in that town. That's no coincidence. The Senate committee on that it's a commonality. Where the Senate committee members are from, their states have media monopolies. So the guidelines that are used in this study are the Department of Justice merger guidelines. If you breach a certain threshold, you're bordering on breaching the public trust. So this analysis, Austin, of course, is in this analysis. Abilene is in this analysis, and Dallas. Abilene and Austin are one newspaper towns, just like San Antonio. And what this study finds is that if any of these merger guidelines were approved, that if they were allowed, if these media markets were allowed to merge, the paper and the television station were the two largest cross-media mergers. If they were allowed, they would breach the Department of Justice guidelines. What this study also shows, basically, is that in Texas, we already face concentrated news because so many of our towns are one newspaper markets. And it tells us that we are already facing homogenized news. That's what we already have. Our towns are barely under the threshold of the Department of Justice standard. So if we allow this to go through, we're going to have not oligopolies. What we have now in Texas, and what's shown in the study in Abilene, Austin, Dallas, and of course every other market, is that we have what are called oligopolies. What does that mean? That means the four largest firms in that market control over 60% of the market. So your KENS, your KSAT, your WAI, and your KABB, your big four. Your Fox, ABC, CBS, and NBC own over 60% of the market. Okay? That's a concentrated oligopoly. A regular oligopoly is just you have 10 equal-sized competitors. 10 equal-sized competitors in San Antonio, we haven't seen that because we've got Clear Channel and the media segregation that we have. We're so glad that you all showed up, and hopefully you can spread this word, because the comment period for the FCC opens this next week. October 23rd is going to be the start of the comment period, and the FCC has been holding these localism hearings pretty much all over the United States. We just got this report on Texas, and the results are devastating. And you think, well, okay, yeah, Texas may be one of the most conservative states in the nation. Yeah, Clear Channel's headquartered there. Oh yeah, you know, Delay and all these other crooked politicians have regulated the media market. Well, the same outfit put out a study on what you might think is a more liberal state, Washington State. And they studied 3 markets there, Seattle, Spokane, and Yakima. What did they find? Exact same thing. They have highly concentrated oligopolies already in place there, and any merger would breach the Department of Justice guidelines. What we're talking about here is unchecked greed of corporations. That's what it comes down to. And that applies to San Antonio. Why are we having to battle Time Warner? Why do we have to ask all these questions of the city and Time Warner? Why do they hide themselves behind lawyers and redirect us and mislead us? Well, it's in their interests. If the public knew what they were getting out of their media, we would be raising hell. So we also see that with our local giant Clear Channel. You know, our radio is pretty much totally homogenized now. Anybody that has lived in San Antonio for any amount of time says radio here is horrible. Well, it's not much better in other towns. It's almost the same. It's just Clear Channel has a foothold here, and they've used this as an experiment. And I think the public access battle is also an experiment. You know, they're experimenting on this market because there's a certain degree of apathy, and there's a huge monopoly over resources and information. Again, the important things to note about this study: if any of these deregulations go through, we know that localism will be hurt. We know our communities will be hurt. We know that we'll have fewer viewpoints. Right now, we have 3 sides of town, the east, south, and west sides. They have problems getting access to discount internet, cable, phone providers like Grande. Why is that? Because AT&T and Time Warner have contracts and agreements with the city that may or may not be of the public record. We've got poor people suffering because they can't get the information. What the Supreme Court has long held is that the widest possible dissemination of information from diverse and antagonistic sources is essential to the public welfare. Well, what we've seen now is that lobbyists and companies can cut that off at the pass. They can cut our voice out by going straight to Capitol Hill, by putting money in our politicians' pockets, and cutting us out of the argument. So, very important for us to raise hell. We have good FCC commissioners, like Copps and Adelstein, that want to make these changes, that are waiting for our voices to be heard, they're waiting to take our opinion into account, and will fight against these corporations, but we have to make our voices heard.